G'day, welcome to New Game Plus TV live on Twitch. You might be hanging out with us on Twitch live on C31, C44, or listening to us as a podcast. My name's Cringe, and I'm joined this week by Jason and Kart with audio because the joys of Twitch live streaming mean that sometimes stuff just doesn't work. And I'm hoping that chat lets us know if it doesn't work. But by all accounts, at this point, it's likely to be working. Jason and Kart, how you going?
Oh, Jason muted himself for the record there, so that wasn't your fault.
That wasn't my fault. He was like,
I'll sneeze into the mic next time if you want. Coronavirus messaging broken.
It's straight up T's on day. You had to move away from the mic.
Yeah.
We've got another intimate show this week. Only 3 people. Thank you for hosting the show, Jason, as you have only for the last 300 and something episodes. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a long time, friend. It's definitely a long part of my life.
So we've got the gaming news coming up in just a sec. Kart, you've been playing a game called Moon, and you're going to talk a little bit about cult followings in games.
Yeah, so Moon was and is, I guess, an old PlayStation 1 game that finally found some love on the Nintendo Switch, because that's just how the Switch does. It'll just... a bunch of games will just drop on it whenever they want. And we're going to be talking about cult classics as well, about how people are visiting some of these games that definitely deserved a lot more attention back in the day, but more on that later.
And Jason, you've been playing Not Tonight, which I would not recommend anyone Google at home, but it's sort of Papers, Please, but Brexit is the way that you spoke about it.
Yeah, that's basically, what it is on the lid kind of thing. Like it's got tongue in cheek moments. There's a bit of humor in there, but it's showing. It's a good example of the stifling bureaucracy of I guess prejudice, and it does a really good job of that. In the same way that Papers, Please did a real concise job of what it wanted to do.
Cool. So that's what's coming up on the show this week. First, we'll get into the gaming news headlines of the week, and with some next-gen drama, because it's the gaming industry, and if we don't care about next-gen drama, what do we care about? SMS messages sent by JB Hi-Fi Wednesday said that customers who pre-ordered a PS5 or Xbox Series X would have until midnight Sunday to pay for the full amount of the pre-order or lose their spot in the queue. Those that would be unable to do so would go back to the back of the queue and would not have a pre-order come launch day. Payment methods did not allow for the use of gift cards, interestingly. According to a report from Byteside, consumer advocacy organization Choice confirmed that gift cards are meant to operate like cash. Any onerous restrictions on gift card use have to be clearly explained at the time of the gift card purchase. JB Hi-Fi has clear terms and conditions for gift cards with no information about restrictions. They went on to say that JB Hi-Fi is at real risk of breaching the consumer law here by misleading customers about gift card terms and conditions. Following the article being published, the retailer provided a workaround where gift cards can be used. This really comes after a long sort of stretch of time where we've seen just a mess around pre-orders, around, I think it was PS5 first, saying, oh, no, you'll have plenty of time to pre-order. We won't throw it at your last second. And then they did. And then Xbox was like, I think Xbox at least committed to, we are going to open it up for you on a date. And then they did that.
Yeah.
But it was still a mess. Like the supply does not seem to match the demand, which is true for most launches. But do you think that, like, where do you think, I guess, most of the blame in these situations would be coming from? Is it on more of the retailer or the manufacturer side, or?
I think it's kind of twofold. Number one is we overestimate our effect on the global market. We're an English-speaking, we're a very small audience, but we're an English-speaking audience, and we're also renowned shit posters on the internet. So our opinion tends to be weighted more because of that. So yes, you can release it. Yes, you can get all your teething problems out here, but realistically, like, it's easy to, if you're sending in bulk, it's easy to send that to North America. They're going to be the ones who are going to complain. They're the ones who are going to order Xbox Ones accidentally because they don't know how to read the website properly. So it's better to make sure it goes there. Number two, they're obviously refocused down on Japan because Japan's allocation is gone too. So,
all 3 Xbox Series X's. They sold out.
The PS4 launch in Japan was not really that. I mean, they didn't even launch on the same date in Japan. No. So that is a bit of a shift.
Yeah, so to me, that, like, the thing is, if you sell 50,000 copies of a game in Australia, you've done really well. So we like to talk in numbers of millions and stuff when we're talking about the success of a game. How much does Australia actually contribute to that? Well, the answer is probably not much. Like, there's games obviously like GTA and FIFAs and stuff like that which might do more, but 50,000 is a lot of units. If you can ship 50,000 in Australia, you've got a blockbuster hit. No, the blockbuster doesn't exist anymore, but you know what I mean. To frame it in those kind of terms, we would have had maybe 10,000 units for launch, I would reckon. And with COVID, like if we didn't have COVID, I don't think it would have been quite as much of an issue. I don't think we would have had quite as many scalpers and things like that. But I also do believe firmly that the hardware supply issues have affected PlayStation more than they have Xbox. And I think Xbox is building hype the right way this time. And before PS4, Australia was always a Microsoft territory. Like they embraced the Xbox more than they did the PS, especially the 360 more
Why
than
is
the
it
PS4.
affecting Sony more than Sony more than Microsoft?
Because I feel like the more you hear about stories of their supply chains not being in place and all of their proprietary hardware, so you've got this system on chip created by AMD that Xbox uses, but the difference with the Sony one is it's got a special memory, like basically a little RAID controller for the different SSD chips, and that's a proprietary unit. So you can only put as many of those in as the board allows, which means that you've got to specifically manufacture that individual part. It's a lesser version of the Cell Engine problem. Cell Engine required you to code for that kind of thing. You won't have to. You just have to code for the controller. You won't have to. Yeah, you won't have to. You'll just code for the controller. You won't code for the individual chips of thing. So it's not like the Cell in that bad a thing. But when it comes to manufacturing, any individual bespoke unit requires more thing. And I think on that front, it's probably the one time that I would reckon that Microsoft seems to have been more on the ball. They seem to have had more an idea of what they wanted the the Xbox Series X to be than PS5 did. And I mean, and people also, again, it's. I think that, again, like you said, they're both suffering from it in a big way, but I think the way that they splashed out with PS5 like pre-orders is an interesting strategy to dealing with the potential shortages they're facing.
I'd like to add to that too. Microsoft also have a pretty decent uncheckered history of hardware specifically. I know the big anomaly there is the Red Ring of Death, which is probably their only major hardware fault or issue or misstep they've ever had. But if you take a look at a lot of their releases with like the Surfaces, for example, Microsoft Surface, their Windows phones, or like even Zune, they've always had a pretty decent hit rate in terms of how well their hardware has been and how much they've been able to deploy. But I'd also like to draw attention towards more the operational side of things as well. Now, it's very important that I think it's important to understand that I don't think anyone is able to kind of be fully blamed for this. We can point the finger at everybody in this situation. And COVID has a little bit of an influence in that in terms of just how their production lines work and how much output they can get in a single day or weeks or months even. Particularly how we're getting so close to release to day zero, basically. But I think a lot of the retailers also run into a couple of issues. Like I think JB Hi-Fi, for example, I was trolling through a lot of threads on certain video gaming websites, and there's been a few people that are potential employees of JB Hi-Fi or people working the front line saying that their website backend wasn't able to support gift cards. Now, we're not too particularly sure if that's bullcrap or not, but they've managed a workaround, which is very haphazard.
Super dodgy. Yeah,
it's very dodgy.
You've got to give them the gift card details, but you have to have paid with it for it with your credit card.
You have to pay it in full with your debit, credit card, or even PayPal. But what they'll do is you'll put in the gift card information by filling out a separate form. It's probably some Google form nonsense or something. And then they'll refund it back to you on your respective method of payment. On top of that, they have there's been other vendors as well that a bit more like independent vendors. There's Gamesmen in Sydney, for example. As soon as they opened up PlayStation 5 pre-orders, this was after EB Games and JB's
they were instant.
Their servers just crap themselves. So they managed to compared to going to a brick and mortar store. If they just say you got to come in, you got to pre-order, which EB Games would have done day one had it not been for COVID. That would have been a different story. People would have come in, they would have done their allocations. You get in at 9 a.m. and you're guaranteed a spot. But people online and hawkers and stuff like that, obviously that kind of makes it far more messy than it should be.
Do you think that the Xbox Series S might have played some of a part in, as much as Sony's got the proprietary chip you were talking about before, Jason, do you think that Series S might give them more flexibility in dealing with some of those some of that demand?
I think again, and this is probably its role in the grand scheme of things is it's to buffer that next gen. You can buy your Series S. The kids aren't going to know the difference, especially if they're young. So let's say you buy them for kids. You go and you buy them the Series S. All their old games are going to work. You can put the discs in, or you just transfer your account over. They'll be slightly upscaled, so they'll look better on the big TV in the lounge room. All those things are true. So then, little Johnny gets older, you can start looking at getting a Series X for him or whatever. But realistically, like having a Series S is like a second streaming solution in your room or whatever. It sits in that sub $500. Like I think that once you start hitting above $500, you start hitting where people go, oof, like $500 is a lot of money. Yeah, you got to justify it. Whereas I think below that, and it really does replace the One X in the kind of the way that they're doing it. Even though, funnily enough, I think the One X is technically a more powerful unit as far as teraflops and things go. Yeah. So for me, I think that it is that case of, if people do want to go into the ecosystem, they don't want to hard commit the other way. So there is an option there that people can then progress up from there. So all the Series X games will play on the Series S. They just won't look quite as good, and so on and so on. Whereas with Sony, I think it almost feels like the disc drive was like a last second addition. Like the shape of the console looks weird with it. Like having an asymmetrical console. Like I understand that Sony have always gone for weird visual cues, especially PS3, the old barbecue grill. Like they've always
George
gone
Foreman
for
grill,
the
Spider-Man.
Yeah, they've gone for the Spider-Man George Foreman grill. They've gone for the weird curved architecture before, but like it just seems lopsided. I don't know.
They were going for the 5 motif, the V motif, and they just realized, oh crap, where are we going to put this disc drive? And it's basically just been slapped on. Like
exactly.
There's no real like excuse. There's nothing there. It's just it's exactly, the engineers just went sign off, call it a day, and they just gone, oh crap, we forgot to put the disc drive in.
And it's funny because, the more you talk to people, the more you see kind of these little rumors and snippets of, reasonable voices saying stuff like the percentage of diskless to disk drives is like they've pushed the disk drives for launch and they're going to push the diskless after that. And then also the diskless might have just been there as basically a price buffer. So they could go, like our cheaper option is, $600.
Well, PlayStation 5 from $499.
Exactly, and that's what they wanted to kind of the differentiation. Like I said, I think the main thing to recognize is that they're all playing different games. Microsoft wants you on Game Pass. They kind of don't care how they get you on Game Pass. They just want you on Game Pass. With Sony, they want to sell next gen experience, and they want to be like a generational jump, and like, so they've gone back to full penis thumb third place marketing bullshit, to kind of sell that message. And Nintendo just, they don't care. They got more money than God.
They're business anymore. Like it's not console; they're in portables, and I think that's completely separate.
Well, and this is the thing. Like I think. And that's why you've seen Microsoft. I mean, Sony will never collaborate with Nintendo, and Nintendo will never collaborate with Sony. It's just not. It's not going to happen unless they have to. Unless they're drag kicking and street. Sorry,
Nintendo PlayStation. That's the Sony PlayStation is an actual console.
Yeah. So Sony PlayStation is actually a thing that exists.
Is still there about the Nintendo.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, obviously, there's hurt feelings on both sides, so they'll never collaborate. Microsoft will happily do that. It offers Nintendo an opportunity to bring content that. That Microsoft, if there's a problem with the thing, we have to call up Microsoft and say, yo, fix your game on our platform. They'll have it done within a day. You know what I mean? Like, they'll pump resources into it. Phil Spencer's always been pretty open to working with them. They've got Ori, Cuphead, Minecraft. There's a bunch of games
on Smash.
And then
Minecraft,
culminating in Steve on Smash. And so there's obviously a move to, like, if you were Sony, you'd be looking at that going, that's a bit like, I mean, they've got Cloud in the Switch Smash. Was Cloud even on a Nintendo console? Like, I don't think he was. I'm pretty sure 7 was PS1, and I'm pretty sure 7 Remake was never on thing.
Well, he is now. He got Final Fantasy 7 got ported over.
I mean, I don't know if the homebrew
it did finally. Yeah.
Eventually.
But that was that. Yeah, so and that's what I mean. So like that's the launch. So that was that same time period, wasn't it? It would have been roughly about the same time that it came over.
Technically on Smash, I think 3 or 4 years. Because he dropped in Smash 4 as DLC, so this was.
Oh, that's right. He did. He was on the Wii U one. You're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. So his presence there is weird. So, like I said, I think they're all doing different things. They're all trying to play the game their own way, and I think the market's kind of big enough for them to do so. I just more and more, I kind of I'm not convinced the generational model works anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, Nintendo's half committed to having old games show up on there, and Nintendo used to be the backwards compatible console. You always got the last gen basically confirmed to be backwards compatible. Like GameCube games on Wii games on Wii U, GBA games on
DS and then DS on 3DS.
Yeah, exactly. So they always had that was always their shtick. Microsoft have taken that and gone supercharged it. Sony can barely commit to PS4 games, let alone the rest of them. I mean, good luck porting PS3. I mean, you can do it nowadays on PC. There's some decent emulators out there, but you know what I mean? Like they're not going to do it. It's obviously not something that they're worried about or focusing on. So
on that topic, let's go into the next story on some remaster goodness. EA has revealed Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remastered. The game is releasing on PS4 and Xbox One on November 6th and Nintendo Switch on November 13th. The remastered version of the game will have enhanced visuals, cross-platform multiplayer, and includes all of the main DLC that released for the game at its original release. I honestly am not that kind of crappy about this because I really loved Hot Pursuit.
Need for Speed is an interesting beast. No, like yes and no. Like I mean, Underground, you had good times with it, but the main reason you played Underground was because it was at every LAN cafe ever. So if people didn't want to play Dota or CS, that was what you had to play. But like I don't know. Criterion died for this. Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of where my mind sits with it. And if I could have a good Burnout game or another Need for Speed game, I mean, it's not even a question. So for me, like Burnout Paradise being on every platform now, that's great. But like, so I don't have the nostalgia attached to Most Wanted in the modern sense. I remember in the old days when it was SS's Run Away from Coppers and stuff like that.
The original Most Wanted.
In the old days. So I never really had the attachment to that per se. So to me, it's kind of like, it's nice, but where's my Burnout game?
Well, I mean, Burnout Paradise Remastered came out last year, I think.
Yeah.
What other Burnout games have there been since then? Like new games since Burnout Paradise?
None.
That was it.
None. That was it. They killed it there.
I do agree in the sense that this is a bit of a sore spot for me as well, because not only was this a game that Criterion essentially died for, but this is the game that they knocked back Nintendo on because Nintendo approached them to do a new F-Zero game, which if it wasn't Sega, Criterion would have been a perfect fit. So that's my sore spot because Nintendo don't care about that series anymore, and I really want them to care. And then second as well, this was the game that kind of started to veer Need for Speed into the Simcade roots. I think before Hot Pursuit, this is when they released Pro Street, which was pretty pants. And then they also released Shift, which was also pretty decent. And I think a little bit after Hot Pursuit, they released Shift 2. So they started to kind of veer Need for Speed towards more weighty handling and all that sort of stuff. They're the kind of territory that that Playground games have with Forza Horizon. So the landscape was kind of shifting, but I felt the Criterion and the way that they use their engine and the way their design philosophy is really kind of veers more towards Burnout and arcade, and less about the racing and more about just like the kind of white knuckled like kind of takedowns and everything like that. And I feel that people give give Burnout Paradise a bit too much crap because its design elements are fantastic. Being able to kind of just to create a lobby, almost like Test Drive Unlimited, where you can just have like 16 people in this massive open world area just causing havoc. You don't even need to race each other. You can just sit there and knocking into each other and doing whatever.
Silly stuff, yeah.
And I feel that, Hot Pursuit, I don't have that nostalgia attached. But for people that do, like, good on you. Like, it's a game that you like, whatever. That's cool. As long as you're enjoying it, who cares? I
was also thinking about, like, what other 360 or PS3 games? Because we're getting to the point now where 360 and PS3 were 2 generations ago. And I was writing up the questions. I'm like, okay, what kind of games would we love to see from that era? I still think that the first one that came to mind, I'm like, what PS3 game would Jason have? Tokyo Jungle. Like, that's absolutely
absolutely.
Tokyo Jungle, Metal Gear Solid 4. That answer never changes.
Let me download it. None of the stupid PS Now bullshit. Yeah. Let me download it like wholesale. I want that.
Yeah. I want to have sex with other Ds in IRL, like 1-to-1 ratio, no latency.
I'm glad you made that distinction in game.
Yeah.
I was like, not IRL? Okay, cool, good. We're not endorsing that.
We're going to Nara next time when we go to Japan.
Sure.
What about yourself, Kart? What PS3
me.
360 games should we be seeing? Whether it's this gen or next gen, I guess.
Well, I was going to say Nier, but that's out the window now because it's getting essentially a remaster or a remake. So they haven't been particularly clear on that. Yeah, OG, exactly. But as far as PS3 games go in 360, I think there really hasn't been any other prolific. I mean, obviously, it was a very important year, but even a lot of games that weren't big enough to get the remastered treatment still got some sort of port. Microsoft have been big proponents of this game, where they've gone and re-released Lost Odyssey, for example, or Blue Dragon, and then they slightly, if you've got an Xbox One X, it runs at a better resolution, and all that sort of stuff. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head aside from maybe like a Metal Gear Solid collection or something
Tales
like that.
games are the only ones that I can think of on PS3 specifically.
Give me Metal Gear Solid 4, but I have a feeling that Konami don't care enough anymore, so we're not getting that.
Well, I mean, maybe MGS4 with like a pachinko like extra mini game chucked in there somehow. Tony in chats just said New Vegas. New Vegas is back and pat on Xbox One, isn't it?
It's called Outer Worlds.
Yeah.
Oh,
but it is also on Game Pass, and it's back compat, so you can straight up just play it. But,
just get a PC. Just get a PC and play it.
Cloney made the bad mistake. Yeah, he made that mistake. I've always played it on console because I've never gone down the modding route. He's just started doing the mod thing. Good luck to your friend. Like, good luck to you when you're trying to figure out what spaghetti code you've managed to put together.
In like 6 months.
Oh, I've got a face mod. Oh, now I bet I'm going to get a weapon mod that plays with the weapon. It's a dangerous game to play because that game is so loved. There's so many mods. Don't even waste your time. To play it on console, it'll crash. It'll crash on you occasionally. Save a lot, but it just avoid the
4 words,
trap.
man.
Yeah.
4 words. Verify your game cache.
Yeah,
It'll be fine. You'll be right.
All right, last one we've got coming up. Ubisoft is overhauling Hyperscape just 3 months after the game's launch. After launching on PC in July, I think technically in early access, the game eventually made its way to console in August, but the console launch did not achieve the high expectations Ubisoft set for the game. The studio said it is aware that it also didn't meet player expectations either, and as a result, the studio is working on a large overhaul to the game's combat, game modes, player modes, and more. They broke down the overhaul into 5 different sections: combat, comfort, sure, onboarding, game modes, player goals, and crossplay. Ubisoft says it always intended for Hyperscape's ceiling to be high, but admits that the skill floor is too high, which results in a difficult experience for new players. You were talking about this, one of you were talking about this earlier, where like, oh, is it that difficult? Like, is it that difficult of a game? Because I have never really gotten into Battle Royale short of like the few weeks I was playing Fall Guys, if that counts.
It definitely counts, but it's very approachable, so yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a hard one to describe because I did actually play probably about maybe 15 hours of this. And again, I've got that also sore spot as well because the same developers of this game were basically pushed off Rainbow Six Siege to do this game, to kind of jump in on the BR craze instead of just sticking to their guns and trying to prop up what is a still pretty decent game with decent playership. And yeah, again, that's a sore spot on my end, but I played it, I gave it a crack, and I'm like, it's actually, it's capable, it's decent. It's got like, it's got a little bit of a vision, but I think its biggest issue is that it's trying to shoehorn itself as a BR, and it doesn't really feel like that. Like the tension doesn't really kind of seem very earned. It kind of feels like one big, 100-man Quake map. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like a BR. There's no weightiness or like, constant kind of changing weapons, and there's no tension in between certain skirmishes. Like it all just kind of feels like one big free-for-all map that houses 100 people. That's not what BR should feel like. Even Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like, a game that's systematically been a very multiplayer lobby-based shooter of like 16 people or 32 people at once, still manages to carve its own niche and make it actually feel like a weighty BR, like, the PUBGs of the world and the Fortnites even. So, if anything, that's Hyperscape's biggest sin, is that it doesn't feel like a BR. It just feels like a large scale, almost like a mag map, where it's just kind of, but like with Quake physics. And that's exactly its issue, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Like, there's no, like, whereas PUBG had the gimmick of scrambling to find weapons, and basically you could get screwed by RNG a fair bit in traditional battle royales. With Hyperscape, just watching, especially you guys play it and stuff, it really came across as I mean, you borderline argue maybe a more technical kind of game, but and I love the verticality of movement and remixing it and all that kind of thing is not a bad concept. It's just I don't know, like when you're dealing with someone like Ubisoft, the scale of Ubisoft in a game like this, who asked for it? Who is this game appealing to? I mean, the 3 most popular games we've seen through lockdown have been Animal Crossing, Among Us, and Fall Guys. And how much technical knowledge do you need to make any of those particular games? That's not to downplay the success of those games, but then they're not exactly. You don't have to have lightning fast reflexes or anything to play any of them because they play off different mechanics. So I think, I just don't know. I think COVID's not a good time for a game like this, but also, like, who asked? Like, you've already got Rainbow Six. Like, you'd be better off going Rainbow Six BR and you would get a better response. I just don't know who this game is aimed at. Maybe I'm too old, but
decision more than it was like a game decision where it was like, oh, BR is still big. We better sort of kick the tires on this. And I guess I can't recall how fast Apex Legends came together, but that had a fairly good launch, given Fortnite and PUBG really were the only ones that found any success up to that point. Apex Legends petered out a little bit, but has kind of settled into its, I guess what you would call niche at this point. And Ubisoft was like, okay, maybe there's still space for this, and they tried getting it started. They just happened to have it come together and release at the wrong time. So that doesn't necessarily like absolve the game of its problems, because it clearly has quite a few. But I was kind of hoping that this would be, short of something kind of different in the way that like Fall Guys is, are we kind of over Battle Royale? Like, we're not trying to when Dota and LoL were kind of spawning all of these other, what's the genre of Dota and LoL? I don't actually know what it's called.
MOBA.
Like, when we saw all of these MOBAs come out and then that kind of died down, we saw all of these BR come out. Have we finally gotten through really the bulk of BS BR?
Depends. It really depends on the context as well. I think a lot of these BR games that are successful are generally kind of knockoffs or side projects of already existing properties. So Call of Duty's
Call of Duty is a good example.
A big proponent of people who play specifically zombies, who play the multiplayer lobbies. And then you've also got the people, you've got the losers that play single player at the back somewhere, but you've also got people who play the BR component. And you can switch between either of them no matter what. So if you decide to go, I want to play a bit of zombies, I'm getting sick of BR, you do that. But you're still skilling up and you're still getting experience and stuff. So you sit there going like, oh, I've got a leveled up gun, yada, yada, yada. I think at this point, Apex Legends, I would say, hot take and everything, but that's probably like the last high scale BR that was able to get away with just being able to just be a BR, and that's its identity.
Standalone kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the last one until people start to get too fatigued. Because you sit there going like, if you're a massive fan of BRs, like you're probably going to play maybe 2 of them tops in your rotation. You might get sick of one and play another one, or you just don't play BR games again. But like you sit there and you throw yourself in that ring already. What are we looking at? 3 years behind the curve and expect people to go, yeah, cool, I'm going to pick up this one and play. I think is a little bit disingenuous and also a little bit too haughty.
So the other thing I would say is that BRs require a bit of a burn and churn. They require, most of them 100 people shooters. They require, whereas Fall Guys, the maximum 60. The game's functional up to, I would say, from 30, 45, you could still have a reasonable game of Fall Guys that'll be short. So it scales well. It can scale inside of that thing. Sometimes in the morning you might not find a game, but most of the time you'll find a game. Whereas with these BRs, they need 100 people to be remotely to more remotely deliver their experience. And like Hardy said, the handy part with that is you can go, well, no one's biting here, I'm going to go play zombies, I'm going to go play single player, I'm going to go play whatever. You've got these other options. You know what I mean? And even when you say it's like tacked on to say a Halo or a Gears, because they're going to be from now on, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to play Horde, I'm going to play Story, I'm going to play Co-op. There's other options for me to do.
Where's Splatoon BR?
You could do it. It'd just be tough because your tick rate's 4 ticks an hour to the server. So counting a kill is a bit tough. But look, I think there's room always for unique expressions of X. There's so many of these betrayal games, like these social engineering games. Why is Among Us popular? Well, it's the zeitgeist. Bulldog plays it. so then Soda Poppin picked up on that. And once that happened, bang, it was huge, right? So it was partially driven by the zeitgeist. It was all these streamers at that point were looking for these cheap games that they found Among Us. It was $5 a pop or $6 a pop or whatever it was. It's cheap, it's easy, you don't have to know any particular skills, you don't have to learn any lore, you don't have to learn any mechanics. It's literally just like the 4 or 5 mechanics that it has are very straightforward. I get an event, I hide. I see a body, I report it. I can sabotage because I'm a thing. So it's all very simple, very easy to pick up. And so that I think there will always be a place for a unique version of X. But as a standalone version of X, it has to be very, very unique, and you have to find a way to mitigate the eventual decline in your communities. Like even MOBAs and stuff, all you got to find is 10 people. And you might, especially in an Australian server for Dota, you might get paired with the same 10 people, and it might be fucking Anna from OG coming with his mates just to pub stomp you. That's fine. That's a rite of passage. But finding 100 people in the same spot when you want to play, I think that is probably always going to be the stumbling block for a lot of BRs.
The same argument can be made to auto chess as well. Like, remember when auto chess was like a massive craze, and we don't really hear much about it aside from the proponents that are already part of Dota, stuff like that.
But I mean, even then, it's like PUBG. They rely on the Chinese market to carry that. And you still only need 9 people. You know what I mean? Like, you can keep churning through. You only need 9 people. And worst comes to, they can chuck bots in, and you're not going to know half the time. You just have the bots drop out in the first round or two. They're not going to know the difference. No one's going to go that deep into it, look into it. But at the same time, with BRs, you start putting bots into that, people will notice it straight away. I don't know.
I mean, I still haven't. I haven't played a whole lot of Battle Royale. I wouldn't mind playing more Fall Guys because it's dumb enough that I can kind of get through it and not be particularly stressed out or frustrated in the same way that I would be playing like Fortnite or Apex. But
Fall Guys makes me want to murder. Fall Guys makes me want to murder people, like worse than nearly any other game I play. I can play Dota, and if I lose in Dota, and because Dota's such a high skill game, I don't mind. But they're just better than me. Like, I'll cop it, and you can work with a 5-person team to figure out a strategy. They've got one really good player. You can work on a real deep strategy to do blah, blah, blah. In Fall Guys, they can't even push the fucking ball properly, so I'm not trusting these people to help me win this match. They can all die. I wish they all died just in that moment. As soon as just snap my fingers and they just that was it. Like, it makes
activates the monkey brain.
Angers me. That game it activates the monkey brain. That game angers me so much more than nearly any other game that exists. And it's because it's so simple. It's because how can you not understand the physics of pushing a goddamn ball down the road? Like, were you dropped on your head or something? I don't understand. Like, what is wrong with your brain that you can't figure out that push the ball down the way and then they'll get caught in corners and stuff. It's like, yes, because that's how physics works. What's it wrong? Anyway,
you seem really shocked. It's all good.
Fall Guys makes me angry. Fall Guys makes me angry.
Moving out with someone who clearly has never moved in their life.
Don't you bring up moving out.
Okay, it's something else. You're hanging out with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. We'll be back in a sec talking more video games. You're back with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. You might be hanging out with us on C31, C44, or listening as a podcast. My name's Cringe. I'm here with Jason and Kart. Look, we're no strangers to sort of niche, smaller games. Sort of loosely falls into the same ballpark as games with cult followings. I'm not sure if I'm trying to think of some games that might do that, but we'll get into that a little bit later on because Kart, you've been playing a game called Moon. This is not a new release, but it is a new Switch re-release. What is it?
So Moon is a recently released game that dropped on the Nintendo eShop. We're probably talking about maybe a month or two ago, which is a localization of Moon Remix RPG Adventure that came out way back on the PlayStation 1 in Japan around about 1997 by developer Love Delic. I know. More on that later. That's fine. It depicts the adventures of a young boy who was thrust into his television set and teleported into the world of his favorite JRPG game that he was playing before. Now, compared to a lot of games at the time and even now, the general gist here is that you take up the role of the main hero and bring balance to a ravaged land, but instead it tasks you as an invisible boy who is urged by a being named Queen Aphrodite to save her and the world by undoing the damage caused by the main armored protagonist of the game that you're playing as a child, which thematically is your antagonist. I know that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but we'll talk more about that later.
So you mentioned that it sort of plays like a JRPG, or the game that you're playing plays like a JRPG.
Yes.
that sort of like meta vibe about it. Is it pretty early on that you are, I guess, transported into the game?
Yeah, so as you saw there on the footage just then, the game starts off like the first 10 minutes is basically like it's kind of making a mockery of, you know, those kind of Dragon Quest style RPGs with like really just like 16-bit style flavoring, and you're going around and, you know, you're fighting monsters, and it's kind of a scripted sequence. But if there was like one way I would describe the game, I think the term anti-RPG would do it. And I think the developers have said the exact same thing. So the player kind of progresses through the game by procuring love. And this can be achieved in a variety of ways, like finding corpses of monsters defeated by the main protagonist of the game, and then basically catching their spirit, catching their ghost, and then reviving them. Or even just by helping people around the town, completing fetch quests, or, you know, spending time with the inhabitants of the town the world that you're sucked into, basically. So I think like anti-RPG is a pretty fitting term because it really kind of serves as like a tongue-in-cheek satire of RPG games. Like it really is just kind of just making fun of everything. And on the surface level, the game isn't really afraid to kind of poke fun at the main antagonist of the game, which is like the guy in the armored suit that goes around killing and collecting experience. Is basically like framed as just really sociopathic, but like incredibly inefficient. And he basically fumbles at anything that's not like killing like low level enemies so you can grind for XP, or how the civilians are completely fine with like the antagonist of the game just rummaging through their belongings for money and potions and stuff. But when you go and do it, they have an issue with it. You know, they don't extend that same courtesy to you. So they sit there and they just like, they drag you at the back and they start going, "You're a naughty boy for doing this." But the other guy's like, "Yeah, cool, just grab our shit, whatever." So there's other layers to it as well, like how a small, tiny island that you're sucked into manages to house so many different climates and people from all walks of life. Like it's basically like the desert area and like the grassy area, like the grassy field is basically like a stone's throw away, and the game kind of makes fun of itself for that a little bit. And like it keeps its lighthearted demeanor to be kind of harmless observational comedy rather than like being really quickly degenerating to like smug cynicism. Like, this is a video game, guys.
I was going to say, does that subversion get kind of tired by not towards the end, but like
I'm going to say, just from watching this, Kart, and knowing you would be the Earthbound stan that you are, I am. This screams your toy to me. Like it just
does, right?
screams, yeah. Like I can see why straight away you did it, and I think Armed and Dangerous is a similar title where it's kind of an era, kind of taking the mickey out of those particular style of games, and it seems like this kind of falls into that same thing where, you know, like it does have that. It's taking the piss out of something very obviously, but it's not kind of leaning so hard into it that it becomes like the singular form of its identity.
Yeah, and it's like it's just and this is a testament, really. This came 2 years after Earthbound, and it's really incredible knowing like how ahead of its time it was. And like I guess coming around about the same time, this came out the same year as Final Fantasy VII did in Japan. That was a game that was without a doubt in everyone's PlayStation 1 disc tray. And it's very easy to understand how this game managed to kind of inspire its contemporaries, such as like Undertale, Off, Contact, and even Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land. And I'm fairly certain a lot of these...
I remember.
Yeah, and a lot of these former employees of this company actually went on to make those games, like the Tingle game. So I can't really understate the significance of the localization at all, but it really just goes to show how important and how integral it is. But yeah, it's an interesting game where like the game runs on kind of like a day-night cycle, which wasn't eventually getting to the point where a lot of games during the PS1 era and N64 era were starting to do that and kind of play around with it. I mean, Majora's Mask, for example, is a really good example. Dead Rising, for example, a couple of years later, like using time mechanics, lightning returns, all that sort of stuff.
I mean, Animal Crossing.
And Animal Crossing as well. Yeah, exactly. But like in order to kind of further progress through the game, you need to kind of complete all these quests, save all these monsters. And what happens is you go to sleep, and then you level up. And basically, the more you level up, the further distance you can go to kind of unlock these other areas. So it all happens very organically. The game kind of slowly opens up to you. You'll notice on the top left-hand corner of the screen as well, you've got that weird kind of, that's the day-night cycle. And it basically shows you how much time you have left until you run out of time, and you basically kind of stop dead in your tracks and you die. The game autosaves a lot, so it's not really kind of too hard
punishing.
or too gamey. Like it actually kind of respects your time enough. And if there's like if there's an area that you do, or like a certain segment that you do miss throughout the day, you can always kind of like skip a couple of days later on. Like if there's a person or a monster that only shows up at night or shows up on a particular day, the game doesn't give you any penalties, or like there's no deadlines. You can just basically sleep 6 days and then return and then go capture that monster or complete that quest or whatever. So the game touches on a couple of themes as well. Like it's, I don't know, it's just really funny because it kind of like has a couple of like a little bit of social commentary as well. There's a place in on the map where there's basically a person who's in a very heavily inspired Japanese shack. And the way he talks, like all the characters in the game kind of speak Simlish kind of deal, where they just kind of sound like it's all just gibberish, but you can tell that there's a little bit of like that person speaking Japanese, or, you know, the flower girl speaking French, that
Is
kind
it
of
sort
thing.
of like the Animal Crossing,
Kind of. They're just like, they just kind of go like, so you've got like this one guy that's in a Japanese shack, and like he really hates kids. So you go in there and you're trying to like speak to him, and he's like, yo, you're disrespecting me, get out of my house. And then he starts like grumbling about his neighbors, who are basically, it's the place in the map is actually called America House. And it's basically got the idea of like, you know, the Western white picket fence, you know, the pet at the front with the kennel, and you go inside and basically, you know, it's a, you know, mum, dad, and a child, and the dad's like really into Japanese culture, and he's like an artist. And every character has their own little arc that you need to solve. And this guy in particular, he's like an artist, and he likes Japanese culture to the point where he's annoyed his neighbor so much, and he gets really mad and doesn't like him because he's like, I don't like it. He's basically a weirdo at that point. And it's very relatable too. But but like you solve his arc.
I wouldn't know what that's like. I'll take your word on it.
But you solve like these little mini arcs where he has writer's block the entire time, and there's a situation where you go and help save his pet from being killed by the antagonist of the game, and you basically go in and you jump into a costume and you set it on fire, and basically like that serves as the inspiration for his superhero that he makes, of like basically the Human Torch in a costume. So again, it's really kind of lighthearted. There's a lot of really charming characters in it. And, you know, I think it's really worth, like, a lot of the stuff that happens in the game, it's really worth kind of like just guide bashing it if the game starts to annoy you. But I still feel that the game kind of feels a bit organic enough that you can, if you spend enough time in its world, you kind of get a good understanding of how everything works. So, yeah.
So Moon, it's just called Moon in the English release, right? It's called something else in...
Yeah, it's called like Remix RPG Adventure, but they just decided to call it Moon here.
Cool. If you are not in the Japanese market, it is only on Switch. It was originally on PlayStation in 97, but it's now on Switch worldwide. And you wanted to go into a little bit about like cult followings, because I imagine there would be one around this game. And you mentioned Earthbound earlier, Jason, which, I mean, if Earthbound and I guess Mother don't have cult followings, like...
I think that's the definition of it. Like, you know, when you were asking before, I'm like, to me, that's like, and then Matt mentioned obviously Undertale and stuff, and I think Undertale's starting to outgrow that enough. But I think there's still, I would still consider it like a cult game.
There's actually a reason why
another one, like
There's actually a reason why Moon was localized. The actual lead developer decided to localize it after being encouraged by Toby Fox to do it. And Toby Fox was also actually inspired by this game, so it was kind of like a come full circle kind of situation.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that is, you know, another quick point there is, you know, we've mentioned it a lot in the past. Obviously, we cover a lot of Wii games, but the rate in which Japanese games are getting converted to English and the speed of how they're doing that is insane now. Like, it used to be you'd wait 2-3 years, you know, you'd wait for blah, blah, blah. But I think translation teams are becoming they plan for English releases now, whereas previously it was always, well, does it have enough critical mass to make it over? Do we do it? You know, those kind of things. I think a lot of smaller stuff that never previously would have even been considered for an English release, they're getting them. Again, then there's a different conversation about translator quality. There's a difference between how good a job people do, and I'm all on board for that. Like, you know, we've obviously expressed our interest there, but I'm just glad to see it actually happen kind of in the first place. You know, the details can come next, but it is just nice to see there's enough kind of a consideration for the cross-cultural interest.
I think you're seeing that a lot nowadays as well. And, you know, games like this where, you know, any person that would be completely irrational about this and is worried about the bottom line would look at that and go, why would we even be concerned with re-releasing an old PlayStation 1 game? Like, and sometimes it does pay off, and it's really good to see, even games like Shin Megami Tensei 5 and the Nier Replicant remaster that's coming out. Those are both simultaneous worldwide releases. Like, people really don't understand how big a deal that is.
Because it used to be a massive gap between, you were saying earlier, Jason, like 2 to 3 years. Sure. Sometimes, if you were lucky, like there were it was Project, I always forget the name, but Project Rainfall, trying to get the trilogy
up Rainfall, but difference,
yeah. What do I say? Like trying to get these games over to the West after how many years? Like 4 or 5 or something?
No, more. It was varying. It was like 3 4 years roughly. Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think of any other cult games, like cult classic games, I guess. Night in the Woods was one that kind of came to mind, but I'm not sure if that quite sort of fits the bill.
I mean, like Cave Story, La Mulana. We listen to the weird ones. Cave Story, La Mulana. There was a few in that era that very much had that thing. Spelunky, but I think Spelunky capitalized on a lot of what Cave Story. Yeah, I think that kind of capitalized. Yeah, I still like Spelunky. Don't get me wrong, but I think that it was. Again, if you want to talk about the two different takes on how Japanese and Western developers approach stuff, that's actually a pretty good comparison, because Spelunky is that kind of more just exploration-y kind of thing, whereas La Mulana, I don't know, it always feels like there's more about those big moments for Japanese games, where it feels like it's more about establishing lore when it's a Western one, and that's probably a good example. But it's tough thinking of cult games off the top of your head. Hey, do you know what I mean? Because suddenly you've got to think of which cult games do I not know that I'm aware of in the wider scene. But they're a cult game, so it's not something that instantly pops in your head.
There is a massive movement, especially during the era of, I'd say probably the last 7-8 years, where they've gotten a lot of games from that people probably didn't really have a chance of playing, like that came out on the PSP, for example. I know I'm speaking outside of Japan, outside of the bubble, but a lot of games like by Falcom, like East, for example, have seen a massive resurgency. They're basically releasing all of their like East games and Trails of Cold Steel and stuff like that, Legend of Heroes. They're all coming out on PC and selling incredibly well. And that's a big ballsy way to take. But the fact that a lot of Japanese developers now are finally starting to embrace PC as a platform, and they're dropping a lot of these games that people didn't have an opportunity to play. Now, Ys is massive. There's a lot of people playing that game, and rating it highly as some of their greatest action RPGs of all time. And it usually takes a couple of big high scale Japanese studios to kind of take that leap, and then everyone else follows. But I think in this case, the I guess indie influence is really understated too. Again, Cave Story, La Mulana, stuff like that. A lot of these games that originally got cult followings independently are now being sold as I guess remasters or like remakes on Steam, and they're doing really well. Yume Nikki, for example, a lot of these like old RPG Maker horror games that are finally being remade or being resold or localized, that kind of stuff.
RPG Maker, the new one just came out as well, which I thought was funny.
It's just really interesting to see that if we were talking like 15, 20 years ago, which is around about the time I first played Cave Story, like sitting there going like, you'd have to get that executive off like your mate who has a USB stick, 1 gig USB stick that costs like $100 at that time. But now you sit there going like, wow, I could just go and grab a copy of Cave Story on Steam and and then actually have someone online to talk about it with, as opposed to pretending that it doesn't exist and people have never played it. So it's just interesting to see that scape kind of evolve over time. And we're finally seeing like Switch is basically my machine for all those games that I missed out on or want to play more of. And I think I've got more of those games than I have, first party Nintendo games. Like I've played Final Fantasy VII for 200 hours on my Switch, which is probably about more than 4 times the amount I've played Breath of the Wild. So, you know what I mean? And even other RPG Maker games, Yume Nikki, for example, that's getting some decent screen time too. So it's just, I'm not like, I can't be a hipster about this. Like the fact that these games are getting more exposure is something I'm so excited and proud of. Like I guess this is how it feels to be a father. So
you're hanging out with us here on New Game Plus TV. Stick around. We've got more video game goodness coming up in just a sec. You're back with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. You might be watching us on C31, C44, or listening as a podcast. I'm Cringe, here with Jason and Kart. Jason, you've been playing a lot of games. You were listing off a long list of games before we went live.
Yeah, I have to publish reviews for him
afterwards.
Yeah,
we'll edit together YouTube reviews. And
you have to.
I do. Well, yeah, well, no. Look, okay. So we don't take payment for reviews, and I don't think anyone should, and I don't think anyone straight up does. But like, if they give me a code, I feel obligated to do it. But I mean, I'm talking like, so the games that I've played external to ones that I've so I got what? About six off the top of my head that I'm playing at the moment. That I'm going to have to make some content for. Yeah. So it's been interesting.
But you've been playing one that, again, I was like trying to very quickly string together everything on the show, and it didn't work, and we were late, but it's fine because here we are. One that caught my eye was Papers, Please, but Brexit, not tonight. And you were like, I better not Google that. And the first question was, can it nail the I have a family to feed level of dread? I guess answer that question afterwards. But first, what is Not Tonight?
So Not Tonight is basically a post-Brexit bureaucracy simulator. So you get to choose a backstory, and all the backstories are basically like it's a moral play at its core. So all the backstories are, turns out your gran was half Spanish, so therefore your citizenship doesn't confer to your parents, and therefore it doesn't confer to you. Congratulations, you're a foreigner. Get out. If you want to stay in the country, you got to follow these rules. There are all these ways that your citizenship has been invalidated because of Brexit. Therefore, too bad, so sad. Like, suck it up. And so basically, they put you in the assigned slum. You download their app. You get jobs off the app. You do those jobs. Well, it's like Centrelink, and then they force you to do it, and then the more you break the law, so it is basically, it's a lot of bouncing jobs and a lot of like security jobs and stuff like that. So you start at the local pub, you're checking for name for age on the ID. Cool. Second day, you're checking for age, and you're checking for whether the ID is expired. Third day, you're checking for age, whether it's expired and whether it's the right photo. And you're allowed a certain amount of fails in that time. And then some people go, oh, that's too bad. I didn't realize my thing was wrong. Here's $50 or 50 quid. What do you reckon? And so if you're at that point where you're like, well, I can get three fails before I even get a warning, I'll take the 50 quid. And so it really does start to ask those questions of, you start to understand why, people break the laws in these situations, because it's like, well, it's the best option. Like if I can make my quota the normal way and then still take this extra $50 and that'll help me survive and pay my rent for the next month, I'm going to take the $50. And so it does a good job of kind of juxtaposing what this sterile concept of like otherhood is, and alongside the realities of trying to survive in a world where you don't have enough money, or you don't have enough resources, or you've just been outed as a foreigner when you've lived there all your life, how you deal with that situation. So it does it in that Papers, Please kind of way. So it's a progressing scale of difficulty. The more time thing goes on, the more difficult the game becomes. And it just really does get to that point where you do level 10 of each job, if you will, and it becomes hectic and it becomes too much to handle. And then suddenly, another thing will come on board, and then suddenly one of your neighbors has come to you asking for help, and so like, do you help the neighbor? But that's a night that you're meant to be working. If you miss too many nights of work, the coppers come around and hassle you. So it really becomes that thing, similar to Papers, Please. It juxtaposes what the realities of what it says it is. Glory to our Tosca. Brexit will save us from these things, with the realities of what that actually looks like as far as what the bureaucracy means, and the cold-heartedness of it. And a lot of games have really touched on this. The guy who did Papers, Please went on to do Obra Dinn, and Obra Dinn, the guys who like, Cardi's big fan, Porky's big fan. We've got a heap of people who love that game. Death and Taxes is the other one. There's a few big titles that do it, and there's a lot of other titles that do it. Like, it seems to be the two main genres at the moment, if you don't count Battle Royale, tactical RPGs and bureaucracy simulators. So they're the two main.
Just get on JobSeeker.
Yeah, well, everyone's got time to experience it at the moment. Thanks, Joshy. So it's a good chance to really investigate these games and see what this. And I've enjoyed my time. Like I've played a fair few hours of it and things like that. But I don't know. These games exist as a political message. I think it's one. People talk about, I don't want politics in my games. Well, this is definitely not the game for you. And I would argue that games have been political for a very long time. You're just catching up. Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard to straight out say that you should definitely play it. But at the same time, like I've enjoyed enough of my time with it that I think it's an interesting, quick idea. I got it cheap. I got it for like $4, I think. And yeah, so it was worth my $4. Would I have paid 20 for it? It's still worth it. But I mean, we live in a world of these great indie/B titles anyway now. So $20, throwing $20 on a game is far less of a gamble than it used to be.
I mean, you were saying the concern around, no politics in my game, thank you. No shitposting on my timeline. Oops. If you are one for the politics, the bureaucracy, the intrigue, the drama and conflama of these things, does it really, like, if you are into that kind of stuff, is it a lot easier to try and recommend it to that crowd? I mean, I think crowd, because a lot of us are political as well.
Yeah, you are like this is the thing. You're kind of preaching to the choir with it. That's kind of its strength and its failing. Luckily enough, it's funny. There's interactions where the actual the speech and the written word is funny enough. Some of the interactions with the guests are funny. Some of the similar to what was his name? Old mate in Papers, Please, who'd show up with fake ID. He'd drawn it himself. Yeah, and so it was like, it has those elements of humor to kind of keep you going. Otherwise, it'd just be a dreary slog, and you couldn't do it. But I think the message that it's selling is not. I mean, I don't find it a particularly controversial message. It makes perfect sense if you think about it. But does it
seem like a slow burn though? Because I feel that the more of these like effective, politically inclined games are generally games that are quite slow burn. Like for example, you've got old mate on Twitter telling to keep politics out of your games, and he's got a Hideo Kojima avatar, and it's like, completely missed the point. But even games like Metal Gear Solid pose a very strong anti-war message nearing the end of the game, as opposed to at the starts off as a stealth espionage thriller and then slowly gets to the point where it is prepared to make a statement. So does it kind of like have a bit of a slow burn, or is it very apparent right then and there, like when you started?
There's two things I say that. Number one, Trig did make a funny comment in our chat, which was, I don't like politics in my games. Where's my Metal Gear Solid 2?
He beat me to it.
So and that is definitely true. I mean, there's so many games where politics play a role in it. And I can appreciate people, even bad takes, I can appreciate people being willing to put their takes out there. Like, I understand that that's a difficult thing to say in modern culture. Yeah, but like, it's when they pull punches that I hate more. When it's the obvious design by community. Because you can say what you want about Kojima. Like, I'm the first person to rip on Kojima, but if he was releasing a game, I'm playing it. It's as simple as that. I'm a mark. But I'm the first person to say, here's what you need to do to elevate what I think you need to do to elevate your art. But at the same time, you're the only one doing this stuff, so just keep making it. Do you know what I mean? Like, as imperfect as anything you could ever make is, I will play it. Far Cry 5. Far Cry 5 is the biggest example of how that goes the other way, where people just puss out hard. Like
we're in a situation where a lot of indie titles are in a position where they can actually pull that, not pull those punches. Whereas a game like Far Cry 5, for example, like I'm assuming they also the kinds of people that they were making fun of, they also wanted a good portion of that audience to buy that game too. So. I think they pulled their punches in that sense of like, we don't want people kind of feeling bad after playing this game. It's like, well, you should make them feel bad in that sense. Like this is what art's all about, baby. You should be aiming for that rather than trying to, say if they burned a copy of your game, then too bad. Like you've got their money. Who cares?
Yeah, you've evoked something, and I think that is more than anything else. And this is the difference between, like you mentioned, indie games. I remember in the old days, indie games were, I remember playing at a game jam. It was a Toho game, but you were playing a whale that was protecting other whales from ships and stuff. And it's a good simple message for a 72-hour game. But the main thing, though, I would say to add on to your point is that they've evolved beyond. It doesn't have to be those super simple messages anymore. It doesn't have to be that real baseline take. You can go a little bit deeper. You can go a little bit digging. Yeah. And I think I played Greedfall recently. I finished Greedfall and I really enjoyed it. And Greedfall is basically You set out to the New World. You're obviously from like not described country of Europe, going out to the New World, to the islands. Obviously, the Celtic islands. Like you're either in somewhere like Iceland or I would even say potentially Scotland or Ireland or somewhere like that. And the natives are all pagan and all this kind of stuff. And so you have what is very clearly the Catholic Church and what is very clearly like a science aligned. Like Islamic Republic, and you're the merchant of you're from the congregation of merchants, and you're trying to unify this. And so you can have these allegories. Then they're obvious enough in that it's obviously the Catholic Church. It's obvious. But at the same time, you can say, all right, here's this thing that represents X. And you don't have to like pull punches about it. And you don't have to you don't have to go super tropey on it, because there are both sides. Like as much as you'd want to side with the natives, well, sometimes they're wrong on stuff. Sometimes they're just murdering people, and you don't want to be a part of that. And the flip side of that, of course, is that you have, especially the Teleme, the religious people come in. They want to convert the heathens. They want to save them all. And there's an inquisition involved, and it's all backroom. And so it all really, if you're talking 1700s Europe and colonization of, islands and stuff like that, it all rings pretty true. And, so to me, like, you have these B games attempting these kind of stories, they like a lot of the template for how they do it is very Mass Effect-y. And they do it pretty well, but it's them kind of wanting to tell. So these are the guys who also did Technomancer, which is kind of a similar sci-fi thing where, it turns out that, you're a Technomancer, they're a very rare breed, and you're trying to come to the thing of that. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you can do these messages. You can make them slow burns. Like Greedfall and Technomancer both took me 20, 30 hours. And granted, I went through a lot of side quests and stuff. This game, it won't take you that long. Like I think once you hit kind of 5-6 hours and you've got like 4 or 5 gigs on the go and trying to balance all that and trying to figure out what the best way to pay for everything is. So you've got the kind of, in some cases, it reminds me a little bit of XCOM. As much as you've got the game in front of you doing X, I have to bounce this pub. I have to kick the right people. I have to. Well, you got the meta game of, well, I need to earn enough money to do this, but I want to help this person for story's sake, but I want to make sure that I don't fail this. So you've got that kind of the two layers to it. So there is some complexity to it, but the actual core message and all that is just a pretty straightforward moral play on what would happen to what was once an Englishman and is now a foreigner.
Cool. So, Not Tonight is out now on. You've been playing it. What console have you been playing it on?
I'm playing on Switch, but it's on Steam as well.
Cool. So just those two. No PS4 or Xbox?
I don't believe it's on the consoles. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm nearly certain that it's not on there.
Interesting. At least PC and Switch.
Yes.
Go and check it out if you want a little bit more existential dread in your life and all the politics in my games, please. Yeah, you're right. Just Switch and Windows. Party. Cool. That pretty much wraps up the show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us at home. If you want more New Game Plus, check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/New Game Plus TV. Jamie put up a new recommend.
3,000 subscriber the other day, so pump our numbers. Literally one of the comments I moderated while we were talking was, oh my God, I can't believe you guys have so few subscribers. Again, for the joke at home, our comments range from, I can't believe you have so few subscribers to, this isn't a New Game Plus mode. You're fucked in the head. Like, yeah. New
Game Plus TV on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitch.tv/New Game Plus TV, 8 p.m.-ish on Thursday nights. We record the show live, and you can also check out our Twitch streams that we do pretty much every day of the week. Maybe not weekends, but pretty much every day of the week. I think that's pretty much everything. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.